Hello, BookTube. I went to the Brattle Bookshop today in Boston. Those of you who are new to the channel, it's a great used bookstore here in Boston. It used to be my home away from home. I used to go almost every day. I don't get there anywhere near as often as I used to, so it was a great pleasure to go today, and the pleasure, of course, was multiplied by the fact that I was meeting a booktuber. I was meeting Peg. Came up from her own environs to visit Boston, and we met at the Brattle and poked all around, looked at every book inside and out. And when it was time for me to check out and leave, I got a very pleasant surprise, which was yet another gift certificate from one of you. Thank you very much. That was added a great deal of pleasure to what was already a good day. I had some good hunting. I wanted to show you what I found. Slightly unusual for me today, I got some larger picture books, some coffee table books. Two of which, well, they're all home related, but only one of them is related to any kind of home I might have. The two of them are the flip sides of the moneyed British experience of all centuries, after, I don't know, the Stuart era, where very wealthy, great families would have their family estates. They might have satellite country estates, but they would also have a house in town. They would have an elaborate, sometimes enormous, house in London for the season. And I was at the Brattle shopping around. Somebody must have got rid of this huge consignment of larger picture books, because there were larger picture books there on every conceivable subject. And I found this one is by Christopher Simon Sykes, and it is Private Places: Life in the Great London Houses. This is about the fantastic London townhouses going through the centuries, but mainly concentrating on from the 18th century to the present day. But right alongside it, I found this. This is by Gervais Jackson Stops and James Pipkin, and it is The English Country House, A Guided Tour. So I got the best of both worlds. I got these things. I don't know what the prose will be like. I never hold out much hope for the prose in books like this. It could be good, but it could also be just totally perfunctory. One way or another, I'll mainly be absorbing the pictures and the floor plans and the diagrams. What it was like if you were, the Duke of Sutherland, and you came to your dukedom unembarrassed by debt, and you became Duke at 32 because your father died of apoplexy or whatever, and all of a sudden these things were yours. What would that be like? I will pour through these. I will give myself a couple of guilt-free hours. But then the other large book I got is one that's much closer to home. I actually remember when this was in bookstores, and we sold a fair amount of them, and I never got a copy, but now I found one, and thanks to you, it didn't cost me anything. This is by Estelle Ellis, Carolyn Seaborn, and Christopher Simon Sykes. Him again. Don't I remember Simon Sykes? Oh, son of a gun! Okay, I didn't realize that. The author of Private Palaces is one of the authors of this book. He must have a gig doing this kind of thing. But this is a very different thing. This is At Home with Books, and it is 100% pure book porn. It takes you through every conceivable kind of setup, from the very messy to the very chic. And one of the things I like about it, as I was thumbing through it, is that it's full of great bookish quotes. And great quotes about building libraries. I was flipping through it. I want to see if I can find it. There's another thing in here, a very different kind of library that's just astonishing. You can't even imagine living in such a thing. Here's another quote from Michael Graves: "Designing a library is one of the grandest things you can do." But there was a picture. I want to see if I can find it. It's just a picture book about all the different kinds of libraries that people have. All the different philosophies of collecting and storing books and displaying them. And look at this. That is the ocean behind her. That is where she reads. Good Lord. But the thing I liked about it is it goes from the grand palatial libraries, things in great country houses and whatnot, to New York City walk-up apartments and whatnot. The walk-up apartments are still multi-million-dollar properties, so it doesn't cover quite the spectrum that I would like. There's nothing exactly like the rather humble libraries that we all have, but nevertheless, oh, this is the sort of thing that could easily eat up an afternoon, and it probably will sometime soon. These picture books, they're so cheap at the Brattle, and today free, that I lavish them with time. I scour them and absorb all kinds of random tidbits, but I seldom keep them. I probably won't keep the English House's books. I will keep the library book. But then the other 3 books that I got at the Brattle today were normal books. There was this from 1944. This is the Vogue Fireside book, which is just a huge anthology of bits and pieces that appeared in Vogue back when, and from Vogue-friendly authors back when Vogue did a lot of literary stuff. Back when the square-bound glossy periodicals were places where people like F. Scott Fitzgerald or Dorothy Parker would run their stuff. And a large part of why the glossies became that way is due to the guy who wrote the introduction. I don't know if you can make out the name. It's Frank Crowninshield, who was an offshoot of the very first water of Boston Brahmin. And although he lived his life in New York City, and he had private income, and he was a wonderful, gregarious guy who was constantly willing to, if he heard that you were a writer, he was instantly willing to just turn around at a party, sit right there next to you, and hear earnestly everything about the project that you had underway. And he was thereby able to attract a large number of writers who really liked working for him, really liked sending things out to him, really liked his approval. So when he ran Vanity Fair, the previous incarnation of Vanity Fair, not the Graydon Carter version of the magazine, when he ran Vanity Fair, he transformed it completely into a kind of a literary showplace, and kept it going for years that way. And he did the same thing for Vogue. He moved on from Vogue to, I think, another magazine as well. But one way or another, he would do that. He would go to a literary place or a venue that commanded an audience, and he would immediately try to challenge, teach, and please that audience in ways that weren't easy. And he was always rewarded by those audiences. They always liked his efforts. So he would go to, the correspondence for instance, Vogue during his years there, or Vanity Fair during his years there, that correspondence, telegraphs, and letters that came to the office is long gone. No one ever thought to save any of it. But there were cascades of letters saying, "This is wonderful. How wonderfully you have changed this magazine. Thank you so much." And he liked that sort of thing. And this is full of 2-page excerpts. It's exactly the kind of old, completely out of print book that you find at the Brattle. You find these things regularly at the Brattle. You don't find them at your ordinary half-price books. And there's all sorts of stuff. Some of his own writing is in here. There is no collected Crowninshield. There should be. And there are a whole bunch of writers in here that you know. But they're also, the main draw for me is that there are a huge number of authors in here that are totally forgotten now. And it's not like you're being asked to read their life's work. You're being asked to read a 2 or 3 page 2,000-word piece that they wrote just for Frank, just for Crowny, on whatever suits their fancy. One of the things that I loved about his introduction to this, is that he accurately predicted the future. He had an uncanny literary instinct, although he poo-pooed it himself. But at one point he says, "It would be bold to prophesy, but it seems to me that whatever else goes, it is just the sort of writing in this book that will remain. Writing which is personal without being sentimental. Writing which is often factual but never pedantic. Writing which allows 70 or more different authors to show the brilliant and varied facets of their natures." What he's contrasting that to is the old kind of Addisonian essay, where the writer just muses with the subject matter, and where the entire essay comes entirely from within the writer, and requires no outside learning and gives no outside teaching. He mentions it here. In the place of that kind of essay, he says here, there is what is virtually a new kind of literary form. And he's totally right about that, literary journalism. or a kind of writing fostered by the better magazines of today, which of course means his own. I refer to the piece of personal reporting, the sketch which is neither out-and-out emotion or humor, nor straight journalism, but in which, generally, with the art that conceals art, you are given just the facts you want to know, but both so illuminated by personality of the writer that they become much more than facts. And when you think about that description, imagine how accurately that applies to how many books and pieces exist today. That is the currency of our magazine nonfiction and our general interest nonfiction. Think of Barbara Ehrenreich. Think of I'm blanking on the author of Stiff and Gulp. But this is the sort of thing that writers do now all the time, and they didn't used to. I'm stroking my chin by my fireside, contemplative thoughts on the sunset. It used to be the norm, and it's not anymore. And he's calling it prophecy here, but he did more than anybody to bring it about. So it's not completely prophecy. So I can't wait to just soak up the thing. I don't think I've ever read my way through it. And then this is a beautiful thing. It just shows up at the Brattle. But this is by Carl Cutler, and it is Greyhounds of the Sea. This is a history of the American clipper ship, which I wanted anyway because it's full of line drawings and color photos and color paintings, and also, as the cover says, 500 sailing records, because of course the whole thing about in the dying 50 years of sail-powered vessels, some essence of it was records, was timing, was talking records and statistics. It still is in the competitive sailing industry, but then all sailing was competitive sailing. So, I would have wanted this anyway, because it's a grand subject, full of personalities and hair's breadth adventure. But also I wanted because I don't have a copy of this, and next month there's a book coming out called, I think, Barons of the Sea or something like that. There's a new history of the American clipper ship coming out next month, and I'd feel mentally undressed to read it critically and then try to review it without having this book. So, especially since, I know that I love this book. I've read a previous edition, never anything this big or this beautiful. But I know that I love it, and I don't know that I'm going to love the new one. So I might not keep it, but I'll still want this. And then the last book that I got at the Brattle this time around is a rare example for me of a phenomenon that is common on BookTube, which is a book you buy because of BookTube. This is a book that I read when it first came out, baffled me, confused me, vaguely angered me, and I got rid of it. And then it's been on my mind ever since, and in a video a long time ago here on this channel, I said that if I ever saw it again at the Brattle, and I knew that I would someday, because you see everything at the Brattle, I would get it and I would reread it, just wholeheartedly reread it. And I saw it. I found it today. It's Against the Day by Thomas Pynchon, which is a gigantic novel. In my opinion, unless things very much change, it will be the last serious novel that he writes. I'm not even looking in the direction of Inherent Vice. But when I first read it, the main impression it gave me was the impenetrable mathematics. It seemed like Pynchon was writing a book designed to be impenetrable, not tough to penetrate like Gravity's Rainbow or Mason and Dixon, but impenetrable, impossible to understand. And I don't like that, because I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that Pynchon at the height of his powers ever wanted to write a book like that. Instead, I think he was just playing on a totally different level than even his other stuff that I'd read. But it's a major, gigantic book by a major American author, and it feels wrong for it to be this big sort of trembling question mark in my mind. So I'm going to read it again. In fact, it's going on my TBR for this weekend. It's going to be something that I tackle this weekend. And if, as I suspect might happen, I find that it's just so slow going, so deep that I can't finish it in the weekend, then I'll just keep going. Keep at it all week. But there you go. That was a Brattle Book-Haul, a rarity on this channel nowadays. I'd like to change that, but I just don't like leaving Frida. If I don't have to, I just don't like leaving her. we'll figure it out. Once she's a little older and I see that she's just sleeping all day long, that might be different. It's the idea of her being wide awake and sitting at the window, just sort of pining for something to do. That just sort of kills me. It kills the whole idea of having fun just out and about, fancy free on my own. But one way or another, this was a Brattle haul, and I had a ball showing the Brattle to Peg. So I will wrap this up for now, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.